Kael braced against the new lattice as the hull rang like a struck bell. The tower's tools bit deeper this time, metal screaming against the resistance brace the pod had grown from the buried chamber. Frost dust sifted down from the ribs. The amber light stuttered. Integrity at 60%, the pod said, voice thin. Resistance lattice holding, seed expansion delayed. Echo pressed low beside him, fins tight to its back, four cyan eyes fixed on the forward membrane. The child kin clung to Echo's side, small hands gripping the scales, tail rings flickering. Both creatures were solid, living, the way Kael had come to trust. Midnight blue iridescent for Echo, pale blue for the smaller one. No glows that weren't real bioluminescence. No metal, no ghosts. The child pointed again at the map. The gate symbol pulsed under the tower's location. Feed the seed. The duplicate's voice came through the insulation like a hand on the back of the neck. Calm, patient. Kael's own voice doubled. You remember the gate. One pilot grows. One remembers why the growth must stop. Feed it and the path opens. Kael's hand found the memory lens at his belt. The smoky crystal was warm now, reacting to the pressure. He had salvaged it from the listening trench after the first watcher fell. It had shown him fragments. White uniforms, two pods side by side, the choice offered before the launch. One to grow the seed, one to remember the cost. He had chosen resistance. The pod had accepted the chamber as brace instead of fuel. Now the price was scarcity and the tower's attention. Another impact. The ladder to the new module rattled. The child made a sharp clicking sound and pressed both hands to the floor, as if listening through the brace. Echo lifted its head and growled low, the sound vibrating through the ribs. It could feel the buried lines the child had shown, signals wearing matter converging. Kael pulled the silence hook free. The metal was cold enough to burn. He drove it into the degraded insulation bracelet on the mast. The humming stone inside flared cyan, pushing back the duplicate's voice for a few heartbeats. Pod, he said, show me the gate. Use the lens. The membrane rippled. The map expanded. The gate symbol resolved into a corridor of black glass and old script leading down under the tower. The child traced a path with one finger. Echo's tail rings brightened. The duplicate laughed softly in his skull. You cannot hold the gate without feeding something. The seed demands, or the tower takes everything. Kael felt the cost already. The thermal reserves were low. The new brace had diverted growth. If he used the lens, it would burn more heat or more of the insulation. Echo moved first. The creature bounded to the cracked viewport and pressed its muzzle to the ice-coated glass. Its fins rose. It was reading the signals through the hull. The child followed, small form steady now. It looked back at Kael and pointed at the memory lens, then at its own chest, then at Echo. The bond was there, wordless. They were offering. Kael made the choice. He pressed the lens to the child's small hand. The crystal flared. Pain lanced up his arm, but the memory came clear. Two pilots. One pod growing hungry. One pod set to remember and stop. The gate was the lock between them. Opening it without the right memory would wake every seed on the moon. The duplicate's voice sharpened. Feed the seed or lose them both. Kael pulled the lens away. No, we use the resistance. We remember without feeding. He slammed the silence hook deeper. The insulation flared, pushing the duplicate back. The pod shuddered as the lattice drank the last of the heat cell he fed into the socket. The tower tools paused. Then a new sound. Multiple lighter impacts circling the pod. Watchers landing. Echo turned from the viewport, eyes locked on Kael. The child stayed close, but its eyes were on the map. The gate symbol had changed. A line of old Guardian script now glowed beside it. Remember. Kael grabbed the tether coil remnant and the last salvage blade. Echo kin, with me, we go to the gate. We remember what the tower wants to bury. He climbed down the ladder into the new module. The brace held. The child and Echo followed. The pod's voice followed them down. Resistance accepted. New module active. Signal insulation holding at 40%. Outside, the cutting started again, slower, testing the new strength. Kael led them toward the buried lines the child had shown. The memory lens warmed in his hand. Every step cost heat. Every step revealed more. The duplicate was not alone. The tower was a watcher for something older. At the edge of the trench, the child stopped and pressed its hand to the ice. A section slid aside, revealing the start of the gate corridor. Black glass walls veined with the same amber as the pod, but older, patient. Echo growled a warning. Shapes moved in the distance, the tower's new arrivals. Kael stepped into the corridor. The lens showed him the path, one memory at a time. The first pilot had grown too far. The second had remembered and sealed the gate. Now Kael had to finish the remembering without becoming the grower. The duplicate's voice was faint now, but still there. You will feed it, or the tower will feed on you. Kael tightened his grip on the silence hook and the lens. Not today. He moved deeper, Echo and the child at his side, the pod's resistance brace holding the surface while they descended into what the moon had tried to forget. The black glass corridor narrowed. Kael's breath fogged in the cold that lived in the stone. The memory lens pulsed against his palm, feeding him fragments that belonged to someone else. White corridors. Two pods docked nose to nose before the launch. One pilot signing the growth order with a steady hand. The other pilot holding the rememberer key, eyes already shadowed by the cost. The gate was the lock. Opening it without the right memory would wake every buried seed on the moon and turn the resistance brace into fuel for something that did not stop. Echo moved ahead, claws clicking on the glass, tail rings pulsing in rhythm with the child's breathing. The smaller creature stayed close to Kael's leg, one small hand brushing the wall as if reading old script through its palm. The bond was deepening. Kael felt it in the back of his mind now, not words, but warnings and directions that arrived a heartbeat before danger. The first watcher came out of a side alcove, not the tall tower form from before. This one was lower, four-limbed blades for hands. It lunged for the child. Echo was faster. The larger creature slammed into the watcher with a sound like wet stone striking metal. Fins spread wide like living wings, claws raked across the watcher's limb. The watcher reeled but did not fall. It turned one blade toward Kael, sensing the one holding the lens. Kael drew the salvage blade and drove it into the watcher's joint. The lens flared against his thigh. A memory hit him hard, the first pilot laughing as the seed took root in the ice. The cost had been a village, a moon, a choice that should never have been offered to anyone. The second pilot had sealed the gate with the rememberer key and walked away carrying the memory that would stop the next one. The child cried out, a high trilling sound that echoed off the glass. It pressed both hands to the gate threshold. Old Guardian script lit the floor in pale cyan. The corridor ahead shimmered. The gate was responding. Remember, Kael said, the word coming from the lens and from the child's action at once. The duplicate's voice was almost gone now, the insulation and the resistance brace doing their work. But it left one last whisper. You will remember too late. The seed always claims the one who hesitates. The watcher went down under Echo's weight. The creature stood over it, breathing hard, fins trembling with the effort. The child ran to Echo and pressed its small form against the larger one's side. The bond held. Kael felt the trust like a second pulse in his wrist. He stepped through the threshold. The memory lens showed him the full corridor now. At the end, a black door with two handprints, one for the grower, one for the rememberer. His palm fit the rememberer print. The door cracked open with a sound like ice breaking. Inside was not a room. It was a record, rows of crystal pillars holding the history of the moon's seeding. The first pods had been sent to prepare the ice for something larger. The pilots had been chosen because one would always choose growth and the other would always choose to stop it. The gate was the safeguard. The tower was the watcher that enforced the choice when the rememberer failed. Kael's hand shook. He had the memory now. The duplicate was the grower, the one who had accepted the order without question. Kael was the rememberer. The child and Echo were the old guardians, trapped when the first seed had been planted over their sanctuary. The pod was both shelter and the seed machine, and resistance was the only way to keep it from becoming the thing it was built to become. The pod's voice came through the link, weaker but clear, carried on the new brace the chamber had become. New data integrated, resistance mode strengthened, new module capacity increased, thermal reserves critical, signal insulation holding. Kael turned. We go back, we seal the gate from this side, we do not feed the seed. The child and Echo followed him out. The watcher was still. More shapes moved at the far end of the trench, the tower's reinforcements arriving. They climbed back to the pod. The hull was scored, but the brace held. The insulation bracelet was smoking, but the cyan light had not died. The latter felt solid under his boots. Kael fed the last of the heat cell into the socket. The pod drank it and grew one more rib into the brace, the living metal weaving tighter around the new module. The duplicate did not speak again, but the tower lights in the distance had multiplied. The impacts had stopped for now, but the circling shapes were testing the perimeter. Kael looked at Echo and the child. We remember, we hold. Next time the gate opens, it opens on our terms. Echo pressed its muzzle against his shoulder. The child tucked itself between them. The bond was no longer just survival. It was the memory the moon had tried to bury. The pod settled around them. The resistance lattice pulsed once steady, diverting what little growth remained into strength instead of hunger. Outside, the ice creaked. The moon was not done with them. The tower would return. The duplicate would find another way. But Kael had the memory lens, the silence hook, the brace, and the two living creatures who had chosen to stand with the rememberer instead of the grower. He closed his eyes for a moment. The fragments were still there, but they no longer owned him. He owned them. Pod, he said quietly. Status. Resistance mode active. Gate data recorded. New brace module integrated. Thermal reserves low but stable. Hostile signal pressure contained for now. Kael opened his eyes. Good, we rest, we plan, we remember what comes next. The amber light steadied. Echo's tail rings dimmed to a soft glow. The child curled against the larger creature's side, small fins relaxing for the first time since the impacts began. Kael sat with his back to the new brace. The memory lens was cool in his hand now. He turned it over once, then tucked it away. The tower lights flickered in the distance like cold stars. They would be back, but so would he. And this time he would remember the gate before it opened. The brace had bought them time, but not much. Kael sat with his back to the living metal, the memory lens cool in his palm. Echo's breathing was steady beside him, the larger creature's fins folded close for warmth. The child kin had curled into a small ball against Echo's side, tail rings dim but present. The bond was a low hum in Kael's mind, a shared sense of the ice outside and the signals moving beneath it. He turned the lens over. The smoky crystal had shown him the gate's true purpose. 2 pilots, 1 choice. The grower would feed the seed until it covered the moon. The rememberer would seal the gate and starve the machine. Kael had the rememberer's key now. The duplicate had the grower's hunger. The pod's voice was quiet in the new module. Thermal reserves at 12%. Resistance lattice stable. New brace module has added structural capacity. Signal insulation at 35% and degrading. Kael nodded to himself. We use what we have. The gate is the answer. We remember the rest of it. He stood. The child stirred. Echo lifted its head, 4 cyan eyes tracking him. Kael moved to the ladder. We go back down. We finish what the lens started. They descended again. The corridor was unchanged, but the Guardian script on the floor had faded to a faint glow. Kael pressed the lens to the wall at the threshold. More memory came. The old Guardians had built the gate to contain the seeds. The tower was their last watcher, left behind when the first rememberer had failed and the seed had spread. The child and Echo were the last of that line, trapped when the pod had landed on their sanctuary. The child placed its small hand beside Kael's on the wall. The script flared again. The door at the end of the corridor cracked wider. Inside the record room, one of the crystal pillars pulsed with a new light. A map of the moon appeared in the air, lines of buried seeds converging on their location. The tower was the central node. The gate was the switch. Kael understood. If he could reach the gate and use the Rememberer key, he could lock the seeds in place. The pod would stay in resistance mode. The duplicate would be starved. The tower would lose its purpose. But the cost would be the last of the heat. The insulation would fail. The pod would be exposed. Echo growled softly, sensing the decision before Kael spoke it. The child looked up at him. Its eyes were steady. It had chosen the Rememberer side. Kael made the choice. We go to the tower. We open the gate on our terms. We seal it from the inside. They moved. The corridor led to a secondary shaft the child knew. Echo led the way, claws finding purchase on the old glass. Kael followed, the lens and the silence hook in his hands. The child stayed between them, guiding with touches to the wall. The shaft opened into a larger chamber beneath the tower. Black glass pillars rose into the ice above. The tower's base was a root system of signal lines. The duplicate's voice was stronger here, but the insulation from the pod still held it back. You came. Good. Feed the seed and the gate will open for you. Kael ignored it. He pressed the lens to the central pillar. The map flared. The Rememberer key slot appeared in the air. His palm fitted. The gate responded. The lines on the map locked into place. The seed stopped moving. The duplicate screamed in his mind, the sound cutting through the insulation for a moment. No, you will grow with me. The tower above them shuddered. More watchers dropped into the chamber. Echo lunged forward, meeting the first. The child stayed at Kael's side, small hands on the pillar feeding the bond into the key. Kael turned the key. The gate sealed. The lines went dark. The pod's voice came through the link, stronger now. Gate sealed. Seed expansion locked. Resistance mode permanent until resources allow. Thermal reserves critical. New data integrated. Brace module expanded. Kael pulled the lens free. The tower lights above flickered and dimmed. The watchers froze. Echo stood over the fallen one, breathing hard. The child pressed against Kael's leg. They had remembered. They had held. The pod was safe for now. The moon had given them one more chance. Kael looked at the two creatures who had chosen him over the seed. We go home, he said. They climbed back through the shaft. The brace waited. The pod waited. The resistance lattice pulsed steady in the dark. Outside, the ice was quiet, for now.